Hello friends, welcome to the Point. In today's session, let's discuss about the 1857 revolt. So in the year 1757, that is after the Battle of Plassey, the British laid the first step towards getting a power in northern India. And in 1857, this major revolt took place, which was a product of character and policies of colonial rule after 1757. And after this, the changes took place in British policy of ruling over India. The cumulative effect of British expansionist policies, economic exploitation and administrative innovations over the years, it had affected the positions of rulers of Indian states, sepoys, jamindars, peasants, traders, artisans. Everyone were affected by the British expansionist policies and their economic exploitation and administrative innovations in the society. The discontent here is the burst in the form of violent Storm 1857, and this shook the British Empire in India to its very foundations. So the period between 1757 and 1857, it was not at all peaceful. There was always some or the other trouble, and it saw a series of sporadic popular outbursts in the form of religio-political violence, tribal movements, peasant uprising and agrarian riots and civil rebellions. So even during the famines, British demanded for revenue, and this caused anger among the people. And many times movements against local moneylenders, it turned into rebellion against the company rule, as the moneylenders had the support of the police. And with this, the revolt took place. And let's discuss about the major causes for the 1857 revolt. The causes of the revolt of 1857, like the early uprising like tribal movements, peasant uprising and agrarian riots and so on, the revolt emerged from all the aspects like socio-cultural, economic and political of daily existence of Indian population, cutting through all the sections and classes. And economic cause is one such cause. The colonial policies of East India Company, it destroyed traditional economic fabric of the Indian society. The peasants had to pay heavy taxations, and the peasants, they resorted to loans from moneylenders or traders at exorbitant rates. And the peasants, due to the high interest rates, they were unable to pay back to moneylenders. And these moneylenders and traders, they emerged as new landlords. So by this, the older system of jamindari, it was forced to disintegrate. British policy, it discouraged Indian handicrafts and it promoted British goods. And at that time, the highly skilled Indian craftsmen were forced to look for alternative source of employment, which was very difficult for them. And there was the existence of destruction of Indian handicrafts also. This British, they used to take the raw materials from India and they brought those materials to India in the form of finished goods. And the import of British goods into India, it attracted low tariffs. So by mid of 19th century, exports of cotton and silk textiles from India, it completely came to an end. So free trade, one way, that is, and refusal to impose protective duties against machine-made goods from Britain, it simply killed Indian manufacture. The ruin of Indian industry, it increased the pressure on agriculture and the land. And this could not support all the people. The lopsided development, it resulted in pauperization of the country in general. Political cause for the rise of 1857 revolt. The East India Company was a greedy policy of aggrandizement, which accompanied by broken pledges and promises, and this resulted in contempt for the company and the loss of political prestige. The policies like subsidiary alliance and doctrine of lapse was one of the cause for 1857 revolt. The right of succession, it was denied particularly to the Hindu princes, and this was the other political cause for the rise of 1857 revolt. Administrative causes. Uncontrolled corruption in the company's administration, especially among the police, petty officials and the lower law courts. It was the major cause of discontent. And many historians say that the corruption we see in India till today, it is the legacy of the company rule. Socio-religious causes. Racial overtones and superiority complex. The attempts at socio-religious reform like abolition of sati, support to widow remarriage and women's education, it were seen by a large section of population as interference in the social and religious domains of Indian society by outsiders. So this fears, it compounded by the government's decision to tax mosque and temple lands and making laws such as Religious Disabilities Act 1857, and this act it modified Hindu customs, for example declaring that a change of religion did not debar a son from inheriting the property of his heathen father. That means the Hindu princes, they were denied from the right of succession. Suppose if they had changed their religion apart from Hindus, if they have changed to Christianity or some other religion, then that princess had the right of succession. Influence of outside events. So this revolt of 1857, it coincided with certain outside events in which the British suffered serious losses, like the first Afghan war, Punjab wars and the Crimean wars. So by seeing and listening about this war, Indians obviously had a psychological repercussions, like the British was not so strong and they felt we could easily defeat them. Discontent among sepoys. The discontent among sepoys, it was generally increasing. Restrictions were there on wearing caste and sectarian marks. So to the Hindu religion of that time, crossing the seas, it was meant the loss of caste. So in the year 1856, Lord Canning's government, it passed the General Service Enlistment Act, which decreed that all future recruits to the Bengal army, it would have to give an undertaking to serve anywhere the services might be required by the government. That is, if they want the army to fight in Europe or in some other places, the British asked this Bengal army to come over there and fight for that government. So this caused a certain kind of resentment, since the Hindus were not ready to cross the sea. The Indian sepoys were unhappy with his emoluments. So the emoluments that was earned by the Indian sepoys, it was very less when compared to the British. The Indian sepoys was discriminated against racially and in matters of promotion and privileges. So finally, there was a long history of revolts in the British Indian Army in Bengal, Vellore in Tamil Nadu, Barakpur, and also during the Afghan wars. Beginning and spread of the revolt. The reports about the mixing of bone dust in atta. Atta means flour, and the introduction of Enfield refill. This Enfield refill, it should be bitten by mouth. So this refill, it was made out of beef and pig fat. So the cow, beef means cow. This cow was sacred to Hindus, and whereas the pig was a taboo for the Muslims. So the army administration did nothing to allay these fears, and the sepoys felt their religion was in grave danger. So these greased cartridges did not create a new cause of discontent in the army, but it supplied the occasion for simmering discontent to come out in open. So the revolt, it actually began in Meerut, 58 km from Delhi, on May 10, 1857. A gathering force appeared, and soon everyone embraced a vast area from Punjab in the north and Narmada in the south to Bihar in the east and Rajputana in the west. So even before the Meerut incident, there were rumbling of resentment in various cantonments. Mangal Pandey, he was the first person who came forward, and he fired a sergeant major of his unit at Barakpur. So since he fired a sergeant major, he was overpowered and executed on April 8th. While his regiment, he was disbanded in May, and he was punished severely, and he was beaten to death. On May 9th, 85 of them were dismissed and sentenced to 10 years imprisonment. So this sparked off a general mutiny among Indian soldiers which stationed at Meerut. The very next day, on May 10th, they released their imprisoned comrades, they killed their officers and unfurled the banner of revolt. And from there, after the sunset, these people ran to Delhi. Bahadur Shah as symbolic head. So in Delhi, the local infantry joined this revolted people against the British. They killed their own European officers, including Simon Fraser. He was a political agent, and they seized the city. With this single act, the sepoys had transformed a mutiny of soldiers into a revolutionary war. The entire Bengal army, it soon rose in revolt, and this war it spread quickly. So once his people they reached Delhi, Delhi became the center of great revolt, and Bahadur Shah was its symbol. So this spontaneous rising of the last Mughal king to the leadership of the country, it was a recognition of the fact that a long reign of Mughal dynasty existed, and it became traditional symbol of India's political unity. And with this single act, the sepoys had transformed a mutiny of soldiers into a revolutionary war, and all the Indian chiefs they took part in the revolt. And it also showed that rebels were politically motivated. Even though the religion was a factor, the outlook of the rebels, it was not influenced by religious identity, but it was by the perception of the British as a common enemy. Bahadur Shah, after initial vacillation, he wrote letters to all the chiefs and rulers of India. He urged them to organize a confederacy of Indian states to fight and replace the British regime. The entire Bengal army, it soon rose in revolt, and this spread quickly. So the revolt of the sepoys, it was accompanied by a rebellion of civil population, particularly in the northwestern provinces and Awadh. The peasantry and petty zamindars, they gave a free expression to grievances. They attacked the moneylenders and the zamindars who had displaced these peasants from the land. They took advantage of the revolt to destroy the moneylenders' accounts book and debt records. So they also attacked the British established law courts, revenue offices and revenue records and police stations. So who were the leaders of this revolt? Many leaders emerged. So in Delhi, General Bakht Khan, he led the revolt of Bareilly troops and he brought them to Delhi. Emperor Bahadur Shah at Delhi. So Bahadur Shah, he was weak in personality. Can say the weakest link in the chain of leadership of the revolt. Bahadur Shah was the weakest link in the chain of leadership of the revolt. Bahadur Shah had a weak personality, old-aged man, and a lack of leadership qualities, and this created political weakness at the nerve center of the revolt, and this made incalculable damage to the revolt. So at Kanpur, Nana Sahib, he was the adopted son of the last Peshwa Baji Rao II. He revolted against the British and he was refused the family title and he was banished from Pune, and he was living near Kanpur. Nana Sahib, he expelled the English from Kanpur. He proclaimed himself as a Peshwa and he acknowledged Bahadur Shah as the Emperor of India, and he declared himself to be the Governor of India. Next comes Begum Hazrat Mahal at Lucknow. Here the revolt broke out on June 4th, 1857. Her son Birjis Qadir was proclaimed the Nawab and a regular administration was organized with important offices that were shared equally by Muslims and Hindus. Henry Lawrence. Henry Lawrence means it is a British resident. The European inhabitants and a few hundred loyal sepoys, they took shelter in this residency. This residency, it was besieged by Indian rebels, and Sir Henry, he was killed during the siege. And finally, Sir Colin Campbell, he was a new commander-in-chief, and he evacuated the Europeans with the help of Gorkha regiments. And in March 1858, the city was finally recovered by the British, but guerrilla activity continued till September 1858. At Barley, Khan Bahadur, he was a descendant of former ruler of Rohilkhand, and he was placed in command. He was not enthusiastic about the pension being granted by the British. He organized an army of 40,000 soldiers and offered stiff resistance to the British. In Bihar, the revolt was led by Kunwar Singh. He was the Jamindar of Jagdishpur. He was an old man in his 70s. He nursed a grudge against the British, who had deprived him of his estates. The 70-year-old man Kunwar Singh, he joined the sepoys. Maulvi Ahmadullah of Faizabad, he was another outstanding leader of the revolt, and he was a native of Madras, and he moved to Faizabad in north, where he fought a stiff battle against British troops. He emerged as one of the revolt's acknowledged leaders once it broke out in Awadh in May 1857. The most outstanding leader of the revolt was Rani Lakshmi Bai, who assumed the leadership of the sepoys at Jhansi. Lord Dalhousie, he was the Governor General, and he refused to allow her adopted son to succeed to the throne after her husband Raja Gangadhar Rao died, and he annexed the state by application of infamous doctrine of lapse. Driven out of Jhansi by British forces, she gave the battle cry, and she said, "Main apni Jhansi nahi dungi," which means, "I shall not give away my Jhansi." And she was joined by Tantia Tope, who was a close associate of Nana Sahib after the loss of Kanpur. The Rani of Jhansi and Tantia Tope, they marched towards Gavalier, where they were held by Indian soldiers. Here the Gavalier was recaptured by the English in June 1858. Not only the leaders, there were also sacrifices made by common masses, and which were innumerable. For example, the name of Shamal, who was a local villager in Pargana Barud, he is the most notable one. He organized the headmen and peasants of 84 villages. He marched at night from village to village. He urged the people to rebel against the British hegemony. The people attacked government buildings, they destroyed the bridges over the rivers, and they dug up metal roads. And this was done partially to stop the government forces from coming into the area. And it was partly because the bridges and roads were viewed as a symbol of British rule also. To Shamal, he sent supplies to mutineers in Delhi. He prevented all the official communication between them. He made his headquarters at the bungalow of an irrigation department on the bank of river Yamuna, and he supervised and controlled his operations from there. So this bungalow, it was turned into a hall of justice, resolving disputes and dispensing judgments. He also organized an effective network of intelligence for a very short period, and the people of the area, he felt that the British rule was over. And unfortunately, in July 1857, Shamal was killed by an English officer called Dunlap, and it is alleged that Shamal's body was cut into pieces and his head displayed on July 21, 1857 to terrify the public. For more than a year, the rebels carried on their struggle against heavy odds. Suppression of the revolt. The 1857 revolt, it was finally suppressed by the British. So the British captured Delhi after a prolonged and bitter fighting with the sepoys and as well as the common people. Bahadur Shah, he was taken as a prisoner. Bahadur Shah, he was a royal princess. Publicly he was shot by the Lieutenant Hudson, and the emperor from there he exiled to Rangoon, and he died in 1862. So therefore the great house of the Mughals was finally and completely extinguished here, and it was the end of Mughal Empire, and Bahadur Shah was the last king of Mughal Empire. So with the fall of Delhi, the focal point of the revolt disappeared. One by one, all the great leaders of the revolt fell. Military operations for the recapture of Kanpur, it were closely associated with the recovery of Lucknow. Sir Colin Campbell, he occupied Kanpur, and Nana Sahib was defeated at Kanpur, and Nana Sahib, he escaped to Nepal in 1859, and later there is no record what happened to Nana Sahib. And his close associate Tantia Top, he escaped into the jungles of central India, but he was captured while he was asleep, and the Rani of Jhansi, she died in the battlefield itself. And by the end of 1859, British authority over India was fully re-established. Causes for the failure of the revolt. So all India participation was absent. Limited territorial spread was one factor, and there was no all India veneer about the revolt. The eastern, southern and the western parts of India, they remained more or less unaffected. And the reason for this is the early uprisings in those regions, and they were suppressed by the company people. That is, they were suppressed by East India Company. All classes did not join the revolt. So big jamindars, they acted as breakwaters to storm. Even Awadh talukdars, they backed off once promises of land restitution, they were spelt out. Most of the Indian rulers, they refused to join, and they often gave active help to British. Poor arms and equipments. The Indian soldiers had poor equipped materials, fighting generally with swords and spears, and very few had guns. The European soldiers, they were equipped with latest weapons like Enfield rifle. The electric telegraph, it kept the commander-in-chief informed about the movements and strategy of the rebels. Uncoordinated and poorly organized. The revolt was poorly organized with no coordination or central leadership. The East India Company, it was fortunate in having the services of men of exceptional abilities in the Lawrence brothers, John Nicholson, James Outram, and so on. No unified ideology. The mutineers, they lacked a clear understanding of colonial rule. The rebels represented diverse elements with differing grievances and the concepts of current politics. The lack of unity among Indians. So, in the revolt of 1857 played an important role in bringing the Indian people together and imparting to them the consciousness of belonging to one country. Apart from this, one great thing happened, that was the unity factor between Hindus and Muslims. Hindus and Muslims, they joined together in this revolt and they fought against the British. Consequences. The revolt of 1857, it marks a turning point in the history of India. Before the revolt was suppressed fully, the British Parliament on August 2nd, 1858, it passed an act for the better government of India. The act declared Queen Victoria as the sovereign of British India, and it provided for the appointment of a Secretary of State for India. So the direct responsibility for the administration of the country, it was assumed by British Crown, and the company rule was abolished. Queen's Proclamation. So as per this Queen's Proclamation, the era of annexations and expansion has ended, and the British promised to respect the dignity and rights of native princes. The people of India were promised freedom of religion without interference from British officials. The concept of divide and rule was adopted, with separate units being created on the basis of caste or community or region. Recruitments were made from martial races of Punjab, Nepal and northwestern frontier, and these people, they proved to be loyal to the British during the revolt. The Army Amalgamation Scheme 1861, it moved the company's European troops to services of the crown. All the higher posts in the army and artillery departments, it were reserved for Europeans, and the Indians were not eligible for it. Significance of the revolt. So the revolt of 1857, it showed the shortcomings in company's administration and its army. So these defects would never have been revealed to the world if the revolt was not happened. So for Indians, the 1857 revolt, it had a major influence on the course of the struggle for freedom. So it brought out in the open grievances of people and the sepoys, which were seen to be genuine. The senseless atrocities committed by both sides, it shocked the Indian intellectuals, and they were convinced that violence was to be eschewed in any struggle for freedom. The educated middle class people, and they were a growing section, they did not believe in violence and they preferred an orderly approach. But this revolt of 1857, it did establish local traditions of resistance to British rule, which were to be of help in the course of the national struggle for freedom. So this is all about the 1857 revolt. We have discussed about the causes of the revolt and who were the great leaders who took part in this revolt, the significance and the consequences of the revolt. See you all in the next session with the topic called Socio-Religious Reform Movements. Thank you.